Welcome to our online conversation on Poland and specifically on the threat to reproductive and sexual rights. My name is Jeroen and I'm joined by Ula Zielińska, member of the Polish Sejm for the Greens, and Tineke Strik, member of the European Parliament for the Greens EVA group. To everybody watching, feel free to ask your questions in our comment section, and we'll see if we can pick up some questions in the conversation that we will have. Ula, my first question is for you. The corona crisis, it affects us all. What can you tell us about the current situation in Poland around the corona crisis? How are things over there?
Hello, both of you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to talk between countries in this really difficult time for everyone and exchange experience. So Poland is on a lockdown, as many other countries, since I think 20th of March, and our restrictions range from the usual ones which you will have in many other countries, like keeping 2 meters apart, no gatherings of more than 2 people, no events, obviously no meetings, schools shut, business, any business deemed unessential also on a lockdown. Recently, we had tighter measures. Actually, over the past few weeks, they have been getting new tighter measures were being introduced, including a complete ban on using any green areas, forests, parks, national parks, any green areas, which is especially for us nature-loving creatures not very good, but that's quite hard for everyone. And since yesterday, everyone is supposed to wear a mask. So I'm not sitting in a vicinity of anyone right now, so I'm not wearing one. But generally, if I'm outside, I am supposed to wear a mask at all times. At the fine, if I don't have one, is up to 7,000 euro. Average salary in Poland is about 1,200 euro. So you can imagine that's quite a high penalty, punishment, fine. Yeah, some of the other measures and restrictions regard Parliament as well, and how the Parliament operates. So I just, in terms of, maybe I mentioned the virus situation in itself, in terms of the number of sick. We actually are not looking too bad compared to some other countries, definitely far off what we've seen in Italy, UK or Spain. So in those terms, we are actually looking quite good. Perhaps it's partially due to the early lockdown. We are doubting some of the numbers. Also because the WHO the guidance is not fully implemented in Poland when it comes to counting the coronavirus deaths. So it seems that Poland is actually using only one of the WHO recommended codes, where actually WHO recommends to use more. So possibly our numbers are actually suppressed by this. We're also not testing a lot, quite less significantly less than many other countries, and that's also a problem. We do hear, so the government's seems to be very confident. What we see in hospitals, what we see in care homes is often dramatic situation, and people not having PPE equipment, so the protective equipment, healthcare staff not having protective equipment, and having often to choose whether to come to work and risk contracting the virus or not, and that's not a good place to be. But the government is in denial about this. They're saying everything is fine, everything's under control, everyone has obviously some of the gear is missing, but everyone has the protective equipment. So a bit of two stories here. The government and the parliament is working, but mostly remotely. And we are quite significantly limited in terms of discussion. Huge laws are being passed through and adopted with very short, within a day or two. So huge packages containing both help and huge limitations to civil rights. And it's also bypasses the constitutional sort of legal framework. It's the new framework is being created as we speak. So a lot of parliamentary sittings have taken place since March, to create a whole lot of new, adopt a completely new law, even though we have an existing parliamentary constitutional framework. So yeah, that's kind of a summary of the situation.
Yeah, so and let's zoom in a bit on yesterday on the debate and on reproductive and sexual rights. Can you tell us a bit what exactly now the procedure is? How is this now all of a sudden on the agenda, and how is this handled in your parliament?
Yes, so it's the abortion law. Let me just give you a bit of background on the abortion law in Poland. Poland currently has one of the strictest, most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. It allows to terminate pregnancy only under 3 circumstances. If the pregnancy is a result of a rape, if it endangers the woman's mother's health or life, or if the fetus is malformed. In practice, actually, it's very hard for women to perform legal abortion, even under those circumstances, because medical staff can legally refuse perform it due to personal beliefs. So a woman can never know whether, even if she has full legal rights to perform an abortion, whether she can actually have it performed at the hospital, which is a problem to start with. As a result, only about 1,000 legal abortions are officially recorded, officially performed in Poland per year. And we are a 38 million people country, right? NGOs are alarming that many more, about between 80,000 and 120,000 abortions are actually performed in underground or abroad a year. So that's the current reality. And on that background, we just had a civic law legislative project passed onto Parliament that bans that one of the 3 circumstances. So when the fetus is malformed, which is majority of the current 1,000 cases a year.
But this is citizens like requesting something from Parliament or from government?
Yes, right? Yeah. This is a citizens project, and the project is to ban those most of those 1,000 abortions that are being performed right now due to the malformed fetus. And obviously, since it's a citizen project, Parliament has to get it through at least first reading, and then vote to to either reject or pass through into committees and further work until the final vote before it's adopted. And so yesterday, the Parliament voted on it in the first reading and voted it through. So it is now passed into further work in health committees and possibly second and third reading at an unknown time so far. So we don't know when it would be on the agenda again. It could be still put into the so-called parliamentary freezer. So the Parliament may not reconvene over it pretty much until the end of the term, but it could work on it further. And from what I've heard yesterday, since the parliamentary majority, a very conservative Law and Justice Party, has now an even more conservative opposition, they are being pushed to proceed it.
Okay, now, Tineke, let me over to you. Yeah, sure.
Because it's a bit difficult for us exactly to grasp, the state of play. And in my perception, everyone expected actually it would have been adopted. I understand that it could have been rejected. It could have been adopted immediately. And now the third option has been chosen. Can you also say that this may be also relatively positive in the sense that it has not been adopted immediately? Or is that too optimistically thoughts?
Yes, I think there is a bit of good news in the fact that it hasn't been adopted immediately, because there has been a motion to adopt it, to pass it into the second reading straight away, and that's not been accepted. So I'm quite glad with that. Obviously, I'm not happy that our opposition motion to reject it in the first reading has not been passed, but there is still hope that since this is such a restrictive project, that it's possibly even too restrictive for the current majority, the Conservative Law and Justice Party. We know from the past term, this project has been back on and off the agenda, and it's at different times, and every time the Parliament was trying to vote or was working through it, usually hundreds and thousands of women came out on streets to protest against it, because we had this project on in an even stricter form, and every time it was put into the freezer, but probably mostly because of those huge protests that were happening. Right now, the situation is different. It's really difficult to protest. And so, but even despite of it, women were out in front of Parliament yesterday, which I'm really, really admiring. They really left homes despite of the lockdown, and kind of formed a large queue in front of Parliament, saying that they are queuing after really essential thing, which is their civic rights. And we are, under the lockdown, allowed to only sort out essentials outside. So women use this as a reason. They said, this is really essential for us. We are protecting our right to decide about our health and life. And that was really moving. And I very much hope that this project will land in the parliamentary freezer. But truly, I cannot put my finger on it right now to really know what will happen with it. Anything could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Tineke, can you maybe tell a bit more about, like, is there any way Europe or the European Union can step in this specific case?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of concerns, of course, in many European countries about what was happening in Poland, especially also because this legislation has now been discussed in Parliament in those crisis times. Exactly what you say, that it makes it impossible for citizens to show their opinion and to try to exercise influence. So that alone would have been a reason to postpone, of course, the discussion in Parliament. That's one thing. And the other thing, of course, it's very far-reaching, as you explain. But on the other hand, it's not so straightforward what the EU can do, because it's a national competence to a large extent. We see many differences in abortion laws in member states. There are more member states that are very conservative in that sense. But of course, what the Commission could do and still can do is assess to what extent the legislation is in compliance with the human rights. For instance, the right to safe abortion, the right to express your opinion, all those, and especially if health risks are at stake, then of course there should be a way of being saved. So it's not straightforward that you can say, okay, this is going against the EU law in the sense that Article 7 or the rule of law is at stake. But in any case, the Commission should take it very seriously and see what it could do to make sure that women have access to this essential health care, or even if it's abortion. So, but of course, this is still in these crisis times, we still have other issues on the rule of law that are still continuing. Jeroen, maybe you want to touch upon that as well. The ruling of the Court of Justice and the muzzle law. But maybe Jeroen, you want to ask something.
Yes, there was exactly on my to go next. Ula, last time we talked also about the disciplinary chamber, which limited the freedom of the judges. What can you tell us about the state of play there? And then Tineke, we will get back to the muzzle law as well. Then in a question to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the since the last time we spoke, great news, the European Tribunal of Justice has indeed put this temporary measure and questioned the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court, and asked the disciplinary chamber not to perform any rulings until the European Court can make a final decision. Meanwhile, the Polish government has questioned that ruling of the disciplinary of the European Court of Justice, and put a question to the Polish tribunal, constitutional tribunal, to ask whether the European Court has at all the right to be ruling in the case of the Polish Supreme Court and the disciplinary chamber. Now, this is obviously directing this question is fully against the Polish law and the Polish constitution, and we know that, and because Polish constitution clearly states that as long as we have signed an international treaty like the European Treaty, the European legal framework, including the European Court of Justice, is becoming our court, part of our legal system. So there's absolutely no reason why the Constitutional Tribunal of Poland would have now some right to rule whether, you know, on the European Tribunal of Justice. This is just not how this works. On the other hand, Constitutional Tribunal has since 2016 has not been independent. It's been populated unlawfully with political nominees, and therefore including its chairwoman. So we have no doubt what opinion the Constitutional Tribunal will issue on that question. So all in itself, it's not adherent to the Polish law, but that just showing you the extent to which the government is in denial about the European Court of Justice and European law.
Yeah.
Maybe to make the bridge then to Tineke to talk a bit more about the muzzle law and how Europe is, well, actually not reacting to this, right?
Yeah. Well, first regarding this disciplinary chamber ruling, it was an interim measure. So the Court of Justice said immediately suspend the disciplinary chamber. And we don't have any expectations, of course, about the Constitutional Court that it will uphold this interim measure. And that actually makes it so even more clear that the European Commission and also the member state should continue putting pressure. I think if we stop now, then we actually only more or less accept that Poland doesn't listen, doesn't comply with the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice. Therefore, the European Parliament and also many member states also, I think, really expected from the Commission to take immediate steps toward the muzzle law, which is actually more or less muzzling judges who cannot express their opinion anymore by jurisprudence, and it may even affect their rulings, right? Their national rulings as well. I think this is a very, very grave violation of the rule of law because it immediately affects the independent judges. But despite our expectation that the Commission would take this step and go into the Court of Justice, it still has not done so. And we from the Libe Committee have asked the Commission to come to the Libe Committee and to explain why it is so hesitant regarding taking steps on that. We have sometimes the impression that von der Leyen, for instance, and that political motivations play a role. We all know that she was supported by Eastern European countries while being elected. And it might be the case that those motives play a role in these hesitations. And actually, that's even more reason, I would think, for member states to also step in. So not only relying on what the Commission is doing, but also they can also go to the Court of Justice and they can also say this muzzle law should be defeated and withdrawn. And this is what we also try to do, putting pressure on national governments. So not only rely on the Council as a whole, because there are always member states who defend each other. Hungary will support Poland and the other way around. That we say to national governments, you cannot hide behind the unanimity, because you can also, perhaps in a coalition of the willing, you can also go to the Court of Justice and express yourself that this is not acceptable. And on the other hand, we also have to look to ourselves, because the European Parliament can also take legal steps. So this is what we are now trying to sort out, to see that I think it's so important also for Polish citizens and politicians in Poland that we show that we use all the instruments that we have in order to support citizens and not leave them alone now with this autocratic regime that is now only expanding.
Absolutely, and thank you for doing this. If I can give you one more argument for why this is really becoming urgent now, it's the upcoming presidential elections. So Supreme Court is one that decides or in doubt approves validity or not of the elections, of the outcome of the elections. And we're just coming up to the presidential elections on the 10th of May, right at the peak of incidence of COVID, hoping this or saying this election shouldn't really take place because no one can run a proper campaign. No one except for the current president the current head of state, obviously. And so we will have a lot of trouble to then, if this election goes forward and takes place on the 10th of May, we will be really questioning its outcome. Also because of the way how it's handled, we're now very rashly introducing, or the majority, the governing majority is introducing remote voting, postal voting within a space of 4 weeks from the elections, which is absolutely not in line with any European, way of doing it. And the post will, Poles who are abroad will probably not be able to vote at all due to all their local COVID restrictions. So it will be absolutely a ridiculous caricature of elections, really, if it happens. And then really our last resort to go and ask, is this election result valid or not, is the Supreme Court, and including potentially the disciplinary chamber, which is, so by this time we really should know, have more clarity on the disciplinary chamber, because if not, it might be that the disciplinary chamber is deciding or co-deciding on validity of our elections, and that will just increase the chaos, legal chaos in the country, and could cause a real crisis. So thank you for putting pressure on within the LIBE committee. I think, yes, it's not an immediate priority within the whole COVID crisis, but it's extremely important for everything that will happen in this country for the next few months.
Yeah. I also believe so, Ula, and I think that at the moment people must feel that they are not left alone, especially also in those crises, and also what you explained, that it will depend on judges to decide if the elections were fair or not. We also need to criticize the muzzle law and make clear that this is not uncontested, and therefore it can be taken further. So indeed, I think that an effective combating of the COVID-19 virus has to go hand in hand with rule of law safeguards, of course. It can never be an excuse to just set aside the rule of law safeguards. And we're in this together. So I really admire your fight, your courage. I wish you all the strength indeed for creating this critical voice and your resistance of those repressive steps of your government. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your support, Tineke and Jerome. Really great talking to you and exchange also the information, exchange support. So it's really, really much appreciated in this difficult time for all of us.
Thanks a lot. Good luck, and let's cooperate. Thank you also, Jeroen.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. You're all welcome, and I would like to thank everybody for watching as well. I guess this is all the time that we have now for this discussion, but I guess we will follow what's happening in Poland and across the rest of Europe in the coming weeks, and I have no doubt that we will be back with the next conversation in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Ula and Tineke, and I'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you.
And
last remark, good luck with your online campaign for the elections.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tineke.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.